All right, good afternoon and welcome to today's conversation about real estate facts and matters that are going on in the industry. I'm Joe Houston, and you may or may not care what I have to say, but I'm going to share my thoughts today regarding something that is going on in our industry, and most people they don't remember 6 to 10 years ago when part of this started, and I've only been around for 25 and a half years, and there's those that remember longer before that. So I don't know all things about history, but I do know what I went through 6 to 10 years ago. And, where we are today in our industry, there's this thing called clear cooperation. And clear cooperation came about for one reason, and now it's being discussed and used for a different reason. And not all bad, by the way. It's clear cooperation. I have my pretty strong feelings about it one way or the other, and I'm going to share those with you here coming up. But clear cooperation as a concept is not a bad thing, so long as it doesn't restrict people in their right to choose. And I don't just mean the consumer. I do mean the consumer, but I also mean brokerages as well, and every single person who gets to decide something in their life about how they do what they do. Everyone should get to choose, and everyone should be given the understanding that they have to gather their information, they have to make good decisions for themselves, and I'm referring to the consumer. The consumer should get to decide who they work with, how they work with who they work with, why they work with who they work with, and just like somebody with their doctor, whoever you choose to be your real estate agent, you should be able to have a conversation with that person, that real estate agent, that brokerage that represents you, or that's going to represent you. And you should be able to gather the information you gather and then together collectively make a decision on your best path forward. We do it in every other aspect of life. Why not real estate, right? And to some people in our industry who have, now I got to be careful because I should honor and respect and assume that people are being honest and sincere, straightforward with what they say about this topic and their reasoning for being on one side or the other. But I'm a little bit challenged, and I'll just jump right into it today. I'm not gonna shortcut things or beat around the bush. There are people who claim that clear cooperation is all in the spirit of serving the consumer, that it's there to protect and serve buyers and sellers. And that's the whole idea behind it. On the surface, that sounds pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with the desire to serve the client. We have a license to practice real estate, whatever state you're in. If you're a licensed real estate agent, we have a license to practice, and then we hang that with the brokerage, and that brokerage is they have a license as well to have an environment where agents can hang that license, and they have a duty to the agent to train and protect and guide them with the ultimate intention of serving the consumer at the highest level possible. Now, of course, like everything in life, there's differences of opinion of how we actually serve the consumer. What is the best approach or the most protective approach? How are we truly in service to the consumer as representatives of sellers and of buyers? There's not enough time today to give you the full perspective on that. And quite frankly, I'm sitting here talking to you today, giving you my thoughts, but that subject's even much bigger about how we best serve the consumer. But and I'd like to have other people in the room with me to be able to share their thoughts and ideas and challenge each other if that was the case. We'll do that on another day. But today I can tell you I'm pretty confident that the description that I'm going to give you, the definition or the theory, the idea that can, what word do I want to use? There's my confidence in what it means to actually serve buyers and sellers. I'm going to tell you that in just a second. And I'm pretty darn confident that it's going to sound pretty good, and you're not going to have any disagreement with it. I don't know how you would based on what I'm about to say to you. That said, there's disagreement in the industry about how we best serve our clients, buyers and sellers, individually and as well as a collective industry, which, it should all be the same, but it's potentially a little bit different. And even if it's not actually different, depending on the motivations, the view that people have of the world, of how we approach knowledge and intellect, and how we perceive our benefit to others. I'm going to tell you here in just a second exactly what I think and how that splits out. But there's a difference, right? There's a fundamental difference in how people, individuals, those of us who walk amongst this world as human beings, there's a very significant difference amongst people in the belief that you either have absolute right to choose how and what you do in this world. You have the right and the responsibility to gather your information, to contrast and compare information, whatever it is that you feel like you have to do to determine your best next steps, to make your choice. That's in everything in life. Everything in this world, we as individuals, as individual human beings, we should have the responsibility of investigating and gathering information, and that's our responsibility, and then that leads to us having the right to make decisions, right? Now, if we choose not to investigate and gather information as some would deem necessary to make good decisions, that doesn't automatically transfer that responsibility onto another person, unless there's some identifiable disability or inability to discern for oneself, best practices or best steps forward. But essentially, if you can more or less gather information and make your own decision, even if it's the worst decision, the dumbest decision, I still believe that that's your right to do so, right? And so I believe that as real estate agents, as brokerages, real estate agents representing buyers and sellers, consumers out there in the real world, our responsibility as professional licensees is once we've signed an agreement that creates an agency, we then have a fiduciary responsibility to inform our clients of all the possible and necessary information for them to make a wise decision for themselves. It's not our responsibility to make that decision for them. It's not our responsibility to put parameters in place that because we might think we're smarter or more experienced, that we put those parameters in place to force people down a path that we think is the best path for them. I just don't think that that's our responsibility, nor is it our right. Not only is it not our responsibility, it's absolutely not our right as an individual or as a collective group to force people down a path simply because we think that's their best path, that we think we're protecting them. And if you haven't caught on yet, that's the defining difference between, I think, how just bringing it down to two groups of individuals. I know there's variances. It's like everything else in the world. You've got one side and you've got the other side, and then you've got everybody that's in the middle. And for the most part, I'd say those people in the middle, which is a greater majority, most people in the middle just don't want to have conflict one way or the other. They don't want to tell people what to do, but they also don't want to let them down. And so they just want to do the best they can to help people be okay and get what they want and not have any problems along the way. And so because of that, oftentimes that personality, the greatest majority in the middle, and I'm working really hard not to say left and right because this isn't a political thing. The thought process may fall in line on the same lines as political, but this is not a political conversation. This is a real estate best business practices conversation that asks the question: what is our responsibility as an industry, as brokerages, as individuals, and then what is the rights and responsibilities of the consumer, who we are licensed, and then once again, when we get that signature that we've created agency and we're working together, we now have a responsibility to them. But what is their responsibility in this? To do their own research and to make their own decisions, not rely on us to tell them what to do. The defining difference is some people in this world think that they're smarter than a lot of other folks, and that the people they're smarter than need those smart people to put it in order for them to make sure that they don't harm themselves in this world, right? That they don't make bad decisions or go down paths that aren't going to be healthy or good for them. And there's intellectually minded people. Some of them are smart, some of them are not. Being intellectually well-versed or loaded up, however you want to put it, is not always the answer. It's not necessarily the way that, it's just because you think you're smarter than other people doesn't mean that they actually need your help, okay? People want to make their own decisions. They want to go down their own paths, and there's all kinds of reasons that they take those different paths. And the challenges that we have, and not just in real estate and how we serve our consumer, but in the world in general, there's a lot of self-centered people out there, and I hope that I'm not one of them. I'm going to give you a very strong and convicted viewpoint on this, but mine leads to you making your own decision. It doesn't lead to me telling you what you should do or have to do, or putting parameters and rules in place that force you to do it a certain way. Yeah, I'm convicted about what I believe, but I am not leading you down a path of telling you how you have to do it, except, and I'll own this, except that I am here to convince you that we all deserve a right to choose, even if it's the wrong choice, right? So in our industry, when we represent buyers and sellers, there's this, I said in the beginning, there's this thing called clear cooperation. And in clear cooperation says that for the most part, as professionals, now I said for the most part, don't rip me and don't hang up yet, right? Don't disconnect. For the most part, as agents, as brokerages, if we are members of NAR, National Association of Realtors, if we are members of that organization, which it's our trade organization, they do a lot of great stuff. NAR does for the consumer, for fair housing, lending practices and everything else. They do a lot of great work. I'm a fan of NAR, so please don't think for a second that anything that I'm saying here is a negative, coming from NAR. I've defended NAR many, many times when agents within our industry. The consumer doesn't really come down on NAR. They don't have any reason to. There's nothing that stands out to the consumer that the consumer would typically identify that NAR as an organization that serves licensed real estate agents. The consumer wouldn't probably identify anything at all, if much, that would be harmful to them in any way whatsoever. NAR does a great job for the consumer, and they actually do a great job for us as well. I could go on for 20 or 30 minutes at least, naming off a number of great things that NAR does, but just take my word for it. I am a fan of NAR, not here to bash them whatsoever. But clear cooperation came about because of NAR, National Association of Realtors, right? So we're members of NAR, and because we are, that allows us to use the title of a realtor, not realtor, but we are realtors. And that is a trademark logo and an identifier for us as licensees, that we can tell the consumer that we come with a higher code of ethics, that we come with some standards and practices, some ethics standards that are above and beyond just a regular licensee. Because we are a part of this organization called National Association of Realtors, we are held to a higher standard because of the trade organization. And what that means as it trickles down is we are members of NAR, and then our brokerage is members. They are members of NAR. And then there's I'm going to use the word cooperative. Careful, where am I going with this? There is a cooperative agreement amongst us to abide by the rules and regulations, the ethics guidelines, right, of NAR. So anyone who's a member is agreeing to live by those standards and practices, ethics and guidelines for real estate agents, for realtors, members of NAR. All right, so hopefully that makes any sense if you're not familiar with it already. So then what happens is it trickles down. Our brokerages, us, we're all members. Our MLSs are most of the time members of NAR, which means they also have to abide by. Now, there are some that are not members, and they don't have to, right? They have complete freedom to choose, but they don't get all the benefits that come along with being members of NAR. They don't get the benefits of being in the cooperative agreement that we have to all practice and be diligent in our ethics and guidelines and rules and regulations and such that direct our industry from the perspective of NAR. So not everyone is a member, not everyone is a realtor. Some people are not, and they're not necessarily held to the same standards of practice. They would be held to the standards of their state board of realtors, who also has guidelines that we're all expected to follow and could be called into question if we didn't. All right, so trickle it down. A big part of this thing called this cooperative agreement that we have in the past was that we put and shared the commission amount. So a listing agent would go and interview with a seller. If that seller chooses that person to be their listing agent, they sign an agreement. And in that agreement in the past, it was the standard of practice that the listing agent would take that listing based on a particular commission, whatever that was. They've always been fully negotiable. But, I'm going to say but, to probably get myself in trouble here, but generally speaking, it was commonly accepted that the expected rate was 6%. Now, the consumers thought that. Listing and buyer's agents kind of thought that, like, am I going to get 3%? Am I going to get 2.5%? Now, guys, don't misunderstand. That was never the case. Commissions had always been negotiable. Now, strong listing agent goes in, makes their presentation, presents their value proposition, and says, and my fee is 6%, 7%, 4%, whatever their number. They say what that is, and they try to get that potential seller or that seller to agree with the percentage that they presented, right? That's them doing business. That's the consumer being able to agree or disagree. Right there in the agreement, it says that all commissions are negotiable. It tells the seller that. Now, if you go back 6 to 10 years, so 6 years ago, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, there was a lot of question around technology, handful of companies on the internet that had designed technology, web-based technology, to promote our listings for us in this industry, right? Take your listing. We want to promote it to the greatest number of buyers out there in the marketplace. That's always the goal. Always, not really, but always. The goal initially, our understanding of how to expose a property to the greatest number of buyers, is to present it through the greatest number of marketing channels and in the best light possible, right? Great photography, great video, Matterport and drone technology, anything and everything that we could utilize to market your property, a seller's property. That's our responsibility, right? Is to expose it to the world in the best light possible, try to reach every potential buyer to the ends of the earth, and based on the interest, we would understand if we had done a good job marketing and pricing, if we had done a good job pricing, because we would potentially get multiple offers. If not multiple offers, we would still get showings and then end up with an offer. Or we'd have some rate of showings that would indicate, if no offers, that then we'd know that we were close but not quite where we needed to be, because that's the market indicating what it thinks of the price and the overall value of the property for various reasons. But we did our part. We marketed. We put it out to the greatest number of potential buyers out there in the marketplace. All the buyers agents at other brokerages, at least the ones that are in the cooperative agreement, that we share this information amongst each other through a particular platform. And then through those platforms that we share it with our fellow agents within that community of agents that are part of the cooperative agreement, right, through the MLS or your local board. From there, these companies, these big tech companies, they started making agreements to take that same data and promote it out to the world. Now, in doing so, they created an environment, they created an industry to promote our properties and then basically sell our leads back to us, because the consumer began touching the button, right? Clicking the button on the internet saying, I want more information. I'd like to go see this property, right? I'd like to reach the agent who has this property listed and ask him some questions. And so initially, it seemed like a great way for us as real estate agents to assist in the process of exposing a property to as many potential buyers as possible. Sounds good, right? Now, part of the challenge became is some of those technology companies that mastered how to do that, they were using our listings to put them out to the world and then charging us large amounts of money to get those leads back to us, which we never needed them, the tech companies, to do that in the past. We were able to get those leads just by having a sign in the ground and a phone number on the sign panel. So what the heck? Like, why do I need to pay a tech company to promote my listing for me when that listing was going to sell prior to tech existing? It was going to sell anyway. So let's go back 6 to 10 years. A couple of companies were big in the space, and there was concern amongst brokers and agents, local MLSs, right? And if you're a consumer or somebody who's not in the industry listening to this, you may or may not know, there's I forget the exact number, but there's hundreds of MLSs around the country, multiple listing services. Typically, they would partner with the local association of realtors in a specific area, and they would become that MLS. There'd be an agreement between them. So the local board would investigate which ones they want to work with, and then they'd make an agreement, and that's where the agents have to put the listings. And that's how we shared them, is through those platforms. But there's hundreds and hundreds of MLSs around the country. And so we would market through those. They would connect with these outside sources. And at some point, it became apparent, became very obvious that these outside sources, these other tech companies, in promoting our listings, could reach a far greater number of people than the local MLSs. That was the growth of the internet. The internet was designed to reach people, find out what their wants, needs, and desires are, and in so doing, ultimately reroute their wants, needs, and desires to the person, to the highest bidder who is willing to pay for that lead. It might have been the listing agent, it might have been somebody else. But if you're still with me, what happened was the fear of technology taking over our industry started to settle into our industry. So 6 to 10 years ago, there's a lot of conversation about how do we protect our data and not lose the opportunity to expose the property to the greater world, because there's value in that. But how do we maintain control over our data? How do we maintain control or take back control over people clicking on the internet but not coming to us, going through the company that owns the platform that's on the internet, clicking, getting people to click buttons, and then not sending it back to the listing agent, but sending it to the highest bidder who is willing to pay for that, quote, lead, right? So there's a lot of real estate agents who started to question the value of National Association of Realtors. There was a lot of real estate agents, realtors, that started to question the value of their membership dollars if NAR and their state associations and their local associations and MLSs that were all abiding by the same rules, if those entities couldn't protect a real estate agent's ability to have access to all of these listings, so that cooperatively we would have an opportunity to go show those properties to every agent's individual buyers out there. If these membership things that we have to pay for as professionals that we're a part of, if they couldn't protect that opportunity, that right, well, then what good were they? That was the message that was basically being thrown around by a lot of real estate agents. They were questioning the value. And remember, I started out with saying I'm a fan of NAR. I'm a fan of your state, Department of Real Estate. Guys, they do a great job. And they really do. I mean, nothing's ever perfect, but generally speaking, they do a great job, right? But most real estate agents are not that engaged or involved in the processes. They don't sit on committees. They don't serve their board. They don't serve at the state level or go to NAR meetings. They don't go to government regulation days and all that. They don't do that, right? So they're just out there selling real estate. They're forced to pay these membership dues. And in large part, the only value that a lot of real estate agents, realtors, see is the protection of their right, their ability, their opportunity to see all of the listings as they come about and have the opportunity to go represent a buyer in selling that property and the assurance that they'll get paid. Okay? So if you're tracking with me, we have this conflict. Tech is invading real estate. They're taking our data and they've created an environment where we can't really go back in time and reverse them taking our data because they have the ability through the internet and their platforms to reach a greater number of people than we do on an individual basis. And so then we have to figure out how to work with these companies. Well, after 4 years of sitting in committee meetings, meeting with MLS CEOs and local association chapter presidents and people sitting on the board of realtors for their different associations, all of these conversations, these debates, these arguments, because again, people have a different viewpoint, depending on how they see the world or how they view the information in front of them. And 4 years, you guys, going round and round with all of this, trying to figure it out. Now, just from a personal perspective, so I'm a small government guy. I believe that I think it's best if the smallest group of people who serve themselves are able to make their own decisions. Just generally speaking, that's where I stand. And so whether you're a town or a city, you're a county, whatever, I think people should be able to make their own decisions and basically create their environment how they want to, so long as we're not harming other people, right? There's always that consideration. We live in a large society, so we do have to be considerate of other factors. But generally speaking, less people running something, the better. And the smaller the area running itself, the better. And that way people can, be where they want to be. They can associate or affiliate with who they want to based on how they view the world and how they want to see life, so long as you're not harming other people, right? Well, in this case, I told people in committee meetings, these CEOs that were fighting for their jobs, they were fighting for their thing that they run. They didn't want to see it be consolidated or all of it turned into one big entity. But you guys, in this case, I said, look, as an industry and as licensees, if I'm licensed to sell real estate in the state of Utah, if I'm licensed to sell real estate in the state of California, Arizona, New York, Louisiana, Wyoming, wherever, whichever state I'm licensed to sell real estate in, I believe that as individuals, we should be able to sell real estate in that entire state without being burdened with having to join multiple MLSs throughout the state, having to join multiple boards, real estate boards, right, local associations. I think that we should be able to sell real estate throughout the entire state where we're licensed. Whether, again, super smart, intelligent people think that we're qualified from county to county or region to region to be able to sell real estate in those areas, that's not for them to decide. We as individuals are licensed. We're held to account if we make mistakes or if we don't serve the consumer properly. There's processes for everything, right? So I just don't think we should be restricted in our ability to sell real estate anywhere our license says we're allowed to sell real estate. So in these committee meetings and these meetings with CEOs and presidents of boards and all that, my argument was that, number one, we should be allowed to sell real estate anywhere in the state that we're licensed, number one. Number two, we as professionals should have access to the same data that the public has. Because for a period of time, the consumer had greater access to the state's data than we as professionals did because we were restricted by the MLS that we were a part of. Now, could we go to the public sites and look up the same information the consumer did? Sure. But that information has never, and still currently in 2025, is still not 100% up to date or 100% accurate. Through our professional back channels, right, our MLSs, those are to the moment. You change the status in the computer, it changes automatically in there, but it doesn't get out to the public sites right away. So, if you're relying on the public site information that comes from these different MLSs, you're not going to have accurate information, which ultimately means you can't best serve the client. you're not fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility to be able to give them accurate information that's going to assist them in what properties to look at or what the pricing currently is of different properties. If there's, something's pending status or whatever, right? There's all these question marks around it that we need up-to-date, immediate, accurate information as real estate agents. So I'm telling these guys, look, the wave has already crashed. It's already come. The train has arrived. The plane's in the air. We're not going back in time against technology. And so stop trying to fight the technology and let's develop a way to work together. And if it costs us money out of our pockets, well, that's just a sign of the times, because if we can't outlaw these public companies, right, that want to serve now what's now their consumer. We have a shared consumer. Now, they've put us in a position that if we don't give them our data, basically, then we're hurting our person that we signed up with an agency and a fiduciary responsibility to perform at the highest level. They really did put us in a position where we didn't have a whole lot of choice in how we promote these things. So I started out with clear cooperation, and there's this thing going on in the industry, right? I haven't forgot. So we're in this place where we have to learn to work with technology, but the truth is most people are resistant. They're wanting to fight it as opposed to join it. And so because they don't want to join it, the ideas are not creative. They're not forward thinking. Most of the conversations that I was around, 90 to 95% of the people in the room had a negative resistance to positive change, because none of it sounded good, right? Nobody wanted to succumb to the fact that just where technology and the world is now. And I think it's proof that today there's really no way to avoid it. The technology, right? So we're all in bed together now, and just it is what it is. So after 4 years of discussions, things kind of went silent for a bit, and from what I was a part of, it kind of ended. And then at some point, about a year later, this thing called clear cooperation came out. Now, this is where I get a little controversial, and if you're still listening, which I hope you are, this is where the big difference today comes into play. There is a company that is promoting as a business model to do office exclusives, which means that they're trying to not abide by the cooperative agreement that says we have to, through clear cooperation, that basically the moment you make a property public in any way whatsoever, that the general public has access to the information that this property is available for sale, you have to, within 24 hours, enter that same information into all of it, exclusively, not exclusively, but all inclusively into your local MLS. It has to be entered in there. And then from there, it through the syndication rights from the MLS out to whatever public companies and public sites that they have agreements with, it will also then, through whatever agreement they have, be distributed out, and the whole world will find out about it. All the public sites will get it. The real estate agents in that MLS and local association that are members, they'll have access to it because it's all part of the cooperative agreement of clear cooperation. Okay, so there's one company right now that is literally promoting on billboards and through their marketing channels that a great way to sell your home is to not put it on the MLS, to go office exclusive, and through office exclusive, there's these other benefits, right? As to a seller, why you would want to do that. So, I mean, I could sit around and talk about agreeing or disagreeing with that as a practice of marketing somebody's property, but that's not what I'm here to do, because I started out telling you that I don't care. It's never a good thing to say, but I just don't care. I don't care if people make bad decisions. Don't get me wrong. I do care. In my heart, I care if people make bad decisions, but as a fundamental right, as an individual living in the United States of America, I would rather go to war and die for your right to make a dumb decision than put rules in place to try to force you and don't allow you the opportunity to make your own decisions. I just don't believe in that. So if you ask me, Joe, what's the best way to market our property to get the highest amount possible for the sale of our home? I am always going to say this. Well, my job as an agent in representing you in the sale of your home is to market your home in the best light possible, to use all the tools of marketing that we have available to us, and reach to the ends of the earth every potential buyer that exists in the marketplace today and tomorrow, and until your home is sold. Continue to reach every potential buyer, every potential buyer's agent, and again, in the best light possible, so that we can attract the greatest number of eyeballs to your property, hopefully get them in to view it, create a multiple offer situation, and get you the highest amount that the market will bear. I've said that for 25 years. 25 years, that's what I've always said. Now, people have reasons why they don't want to do that path. People have reasons why they want to take a more exclusive, office exclusive type path, and I support their right to do that. I support agents and brokerages' right to offer that. Now, those that immediately right now, if you're listening, or if anybody who disagrees with me listen, you just jumped on me and started to explain why that's still possible and how that's possible, and that nobody's taking away that right, this and that. But look, bottom line is, people have a right to make their own decisions. And part of the challenge in this conversation is this. There are some people who believe that they're smarter than others. They believe that they have to protect the consumer. They have to protect brokerages and real estate agents. They're claiming that clear cooperation, this idea that you have to have it, that you cannot market a property publicly in any way whatsoever without putting it in the MLS within 24 hours. They believe that's a protection. They're claiming that that's a protection for the consumer. Now, I could make the same argument to some degree. I get it. Consumers, well, the claim is that the consumer has a right through fair housing to see every property that comes on the market. I fundamentally kind of disagree with that too. I don't see why they have a right to see every property that comes on the market or that they could possibly buy. I just fundamentally don't agree that that's a right that buyers have. Now, I do agree in fair housing, and I do agree that you can't systematically and intentionally, divert properties from the public eye so as to harm a particular group of people, right? Of any kind, of any group whatsoever. You can't intentionally steer people away from properties by not showing them to them for reasons outside of a seller's desire to just have exclusivity or privacy or whatever, for any number of various reasons. But again, some people would claim that that's going to happen if we allow this, and I would say, well, you're probably right. I don't disagree with that. But when that occurs, there's a legal process, and there's ethics, boards and even laws in place that say you can't discriminate. So when that potentially happens, if it's identified, then that person needs to be brought to task. It's not that hard, right? There's protections in place, and yeah, you have to come back afterwards and you have to deal with it and accuse people of something because they're innocent until proven guilty, right? I think that's a fundamental right in the United States of America. We're innocent until proven guilty. Now, we can be accused, but we're innocent until proven guilty. And my challenge is that there's people in the industry right now that want to put protections in place so that they don't have to go after people. They say, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. So we need to protect the consumer. We need to protect each other because there's those bad people in the real estate world that are going to do bad things to good people and cause unfairness to occur. I'm not delusional. I don't disagree with that on some level. But I don't believe that it's going to happen at the rate that warrants putting rules in place that restrict people's rights to choose how they want to market their property. How real estate agents are allowed to market something to get their client whatever terms it is that they want. We have a tendency in this industry, just like I've been doing, to tell people that, my job is to make you the highest amount of money, get you the highest amount of money possible in the current market. But I always add, unless there's something else that you want to create, unless there's a different outcome that you want. There's reasons why some people in my real estate career, there's people that I've worked for that did not want to get the highest amount possible. They needed to be within a certain range for tax reasons or this, that, the other. They had their own strategies as to what they were trying to accomplish. And my job was not to get them the highest amount possible. It was to get them what they wanted, the terms that suited them. And so that was my job, and that's what I sought to achieve. So people who want to make a blanket rule that control how we do things, they're lacking consideration for people's individual right to choose and create an outcome that suits them best in the time frame that it suits them. And allowing them to do so does not arbitrarily harm the greater good of society. It just doesn't. And so this whole thing with clear cooperation, there's people in our industry right now that want to do harm to a company or companies that believe in the right to have office exclusives. They want to restrict them from doing it. And the way that they're trying to restrict them is to take it one step farther and say, if you do this, we are going to partner with other companies, conceptually partner with them, not legally. Well, it could be legally. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the answer to that one. But I believe that there are legal ramifications for some of what's going on. And if it continues, there will be legal ramifications because there's certain people and companies and some real estate brokerages as well as tech companies that are aligning, and even some MLSs or local real estate boards that are aligning together to harm this company, one in particular, so that essentially they'll force them to come around and come back to doing things the way that these people want it done. Well, when you have that much influence and power over the platforms that exist and you malign one company because you don't like how they're doing business, I don't know. That doesn't seem right to me. It just doesn't. Again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know some of the inside scoop, maybe. It's possible, But from my view, from my understanding of what's gone on and what's going on, I believe that we're still fighting, well, not we, those that don't want to allow this particular company and any others to have their internal portals. It's because, look, guys, let's be honest. If there's enough data that's restricted from a handful of brokerages, if it's a big enough amount of data, it does hurt brokerages. And it makes it more difficult for the consumer, potentially, to have access to those properties. They might have to bounce around and go to certain companies and ask for access to that. But this is the thing. If you're a realtor and you're affected by what I'm talking about, then you're also affected by the NAR agreement that we all have to abide by to have buyer-broker agreements. So if that's the case, having to go to another brokerage, for which none of these brokerages that have these office exclusives, the one in particular, the biggest one, they're very straightforward that they're not afraid to do business with another agency. They'll still cooperate, but they want to be able to market in the manner that they want to market. I already know all the argument and the pushback on this from those who disagree about, but it's all projection. It hasn't happened yet any more than it ever happened before when people tried to protect their listings for some reason or another. It's not happening at any greater of a rate than it's ever happened. And so the accusations are projection of what people believe would occur. Another fundamental principle that I try to live by is if you think people are going to mess up and you're going to have to hold them accountable, well, you have to let them mess up first. You have to let them do the wrong thing and then hold them accountable. I realize that we live in a society that have a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, laws, and every law that's ever been put into place, every rule that's ever been put into place is a claim that it's for the greater good, to keep order and keep from creating chaos in society or in industry, whatever. But you have to allow people to do what they do and make their own choices. If you don't, you're restricting them from that. And that fundamental principle is greater than any risk that I believe, that I see in what's trying to be protected against here. And in my 25 years of real estate and being a part of a number of different aspects of real estate, again, sitting in those meetings for 4 years, debating, challenging CEOs, presidents of boards, Department of Real Estate people, all of that. And by the way, being challenged in return as well, right? Not just challenging them, but being challenged back in thought and this and that. It's a lot of great dialogue over the years. What it resulted in was clear cooperation. We're not going back in time by allowing people to have their off-market properties and to market them, because if the argument is that we're seeking to do what's best for the consumer, hurting someone and not allowing them to market to the greatest number of people possible in a manner that serves that particular client that chose to go down that path, I don't understand how we can have it both ways. We can't claim that we're seeking to serve the consumer by taking away their right to make their own decisions, good or bad. And if people get harmed by going down this marketing path of how to present a home to the marketplace, and people get harmed by it, there'll be lawsuits. Let the lawsuits occur. And once those lawsuits occur, anybody who's doing a practice that doesn't serve the consumer well will not do that anymore. That's the way it works. But don't try to correct the problem that doesn't exist yet in advance. My name is Joe Houston. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts for 45 minutes today. I hope you got some value out of this, and not here to tell people how to, except that's not a but that negates everything I just said, by the way. I'm here to encourage and push for ultimate right to choose, no matter what other people think is good or bad. So long as it doesn't directly harm other people, everything works itself out in the end. But stripping people of their right to choose or choose their professional or work in the way that they want to, it's never going to be my answer. I appreciate you guys. I'm going to give myself an applause. Yay. All right. Thank you for being here today. And we will catch you next time on the Joe Houston Podcast.